Why do we feel? So understanding the purpose of emotions is our talk time for today. I hope you enjoy this one with Teresa Saunders, and I'm your host, Meredith McCarthy.
Hi, Meredith.
Hello, let's get into this juicy topic. When we're thinking about emotions, we've got two sort of different types of emotions that maybe some people have not really thought about the categories. So we're looking at, what happens when we have a primary or universal emotion versus a secondary, that socially influenced emotion. So let's talk a little bit about that, shall we?
For sure. What do you want to talk about first? Sorry.
When we're thinking about a primary emotion, I think what gets me focused on defining that really simply is a very, very important emotion that's going to help you to survive. And also something that you haven't necessarily learnt. When they drop a baby to check whether they have that response, that fright response?
Mm.
You know that one?
No, I can't say I would ever say that I've seen them drop a baby, but
not really dropping them fully, but they let them go, and they or the startle response. There are some primary responses that happen that are inbuilt in our DNA. We just kind of know what to do. So if we see something that we're not really aware of and don't know its sort of place in the world, it will instantly give us a fright. So it could be a spider or some sort of insect that's moving quickly or anything like that. So our primary response would be what?
We want to keep ourselves safe. So it's like a primal instinct where we want to protect ourselves.
That's right. Now, when we're looking at the idea of emotions, the universal emotion like joy, most people will have that universal emotion. They feel joy with the simple things, but they don't have to be learning to feel joy. So a baby will laugh or giggle, but they're not learning to laugh and giggle. It's just something that is inherently part of our human experience. Just as a baby might cry if it gets upset or in pain. It hasn't had to learn that, right?
No, yes, it comes from our survival, our built-in instincts.
Yeah. So when we think about joy, anger, fear, sadness, surprise, and disgust, these are often primary emotions. That's what we describe as primary emotions. If we think about secondary emotions, that socially influenced emotion like guilt, shame, pride, jealousy, they come along with beliefs that somewhere in society we've taken on board a belief somewhere, and that is what's behind how we're reacting. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think mainly, but I do think joy and other aspects, primal aspects of our emotions can also be socially influenced, or environmental impacts can change the way that when we're first born, how we react to those and change those emotions.
And that's where trauma comes in. Like we might be in a really joyful environment, but we've been taught to fear things because it might be unpredictable, may not last. So someone may close down that feeling of joy. They may not let themselves laugh. Or maybe they might not let themselves cry or show terror, because if they did, they could put themselves in harm.
And that could be simply from coming from families' belief, and beliefs have changed over time. That boys don't cry. That's a show, a weakness. Whereas now, as years go along, that we're changing our thought patterns on that sort of thing. But that does, or did in the past, and still can do, affect the way that we actually work with our emotions, because we then suppress them. And if we keep suppressing, what happens? It's a bit like a balloon in water. It keeps going down and down and down until the weight gets so heavy, it just erupts. And then we see, certain behaviour issues and challenges.
Absolutely. And often it can come out in young children where they're having a tantrum. They don't have the ability to articulate how they're feeling, but they're feeling something and they have a meltdown. I mean, you've all witnessed that in the supermarket, even in your own house, where you're trying to, do your best for your children, and they don't have the capacity to be able to communicate. So therefore, their primal reaction will come out. But also they're learning social cues at that point too. So as an adult or a guardian, we're there to support and guide that little human through to work it out, right?
We are, but I mean, again, you can look at it on the other way. If a child only ever gets attention by acting out, then what are they going to do? They're going to act out because they get that attention. So it's seeking comfort.
Yeah. And that's often secondary gain. This is what we talk about in the way of secondary gain. They're getting rewarded for that kind of behavior. So looking at emotions and what is behind an emotional response as a therapist, it's quite important, isn't it?
Oh, for sure.
Mm. What are the kind of questions we might begin to ask maybe a client to begin to understand their emotional reaction to things?
Oh, that really depends on what they're coming in for to start off with. But we could ask a little bit about their childhood and their upbringing and what happened, and see what words they actually use, whether they bring and their physical reactions to when they're speaking to you, how they react when they're talking about their past, and whether you can see whether it was a happy sort of past or whether there was a lot of trauma. But even if we say we had a happy upbringing, sometimes that's not always the case, because your upbringing could have been normalized, which can affect the way you behave and your emotions.
Mm. I had a client, he's in his late 50s and he wants to lose weight. And we were talking about the habits of his eating regime. So he's at the table and he likes to listen to the news, but he doesn't like everyone else at the table talking about the news. He would rather get focused on eating and not talking at all, and then he can watch his news in private. And he said to me, he gets quite angry actually if he's interrupted and they start talking about things when all he wants to do is focus on his food or focus on just watching the news. And I said to him, so was there anyone in your family that was a bit like that? And he goes, oh yeah, my dad. But I'm very different to my dad. But in some ways, those are those moments where I can become quite angry and respond in a not so nice way. And so we're starting to look at, his lifestyle and his relationship with food and the emotional relationship with food. So he said to me, oh, I think the reason why I eat is because I'm bored. However, he had a heart attack, and very soon after that, he lost about 10 kgs. And I said, well, what was happening? Were you still in the same job that you are now? What changed? And he said, yeah, I was still working and everything. I had a stent put in and so on, and I got back to work. And I said, but you still managed to lose the 10 kg. What happened to about the boredom story? And he said, I guess it didn't take priority over staying alive.
You often
I
find people lose weight as well when they've had a heart attack.
Yeah. So it was a bit of a kick up his, and a bit of a wake up call. So it's about him reprioritizing his health again without having to have yet another medical event, that he wanted to get on track and stay on track this time. So when we're looking at the emotion behind a person's reaction to the world, or maybe it's food, maybe it's something else, maybe alcohol. These are the things that as a therapist we need to be a little bit clever and find out what's really going on in that person's world. What are the cheat systems that they're put in place by accident that maybe are sabotaging their success? And it actually, we were talking about his plan of making sure he had enough food from the night before, that he could take it to work so he didn't have to go and buy anything. And then he fessed up. He did this right at the end, which was really interesting. He fessed up that he has a secret stash of cash that his wife doesn't know about.
For snacks.
For snacks. Yeah. So that's the odd pie here and the V and, the things. So when we're looking at that, he needed to incorporate that into his mindful strategy. And so the emotion, he's being very devious in a way, but he's lying to himself too, because he's kind of robbing himself of the very life that he wants to live. He's got children and he would like to see them have children and so on. So he wants to live a lot longer than he currently feels he could. So to lose a good chunk of weight for him is really claiming back years and memories that he can accumulate. So we talked about all sorts of triggers and the emotions that went along with that. Now, there's obviously the emotion of hunger, that when you're hungry, you need to eat to survive, right?
Mm-hmm. Again, natural survival instinct.
Yeah, so that would be a primary thing. But then, of course, you've got the secondary thing of treats.
And enjoyment. And food actually gives us that dopamine and cortisol hit, doesn't it? That happy hormone.
Well, the cortisol is your stress hormone, remember? So cortisol is your fat storage hormone. And that means that if you are in a stressful state, even if you're stressing about being overweight, that can create that cortisol. It can really interfere with a person's ability to drop, sizes. So if we're thinking about the idea of the mindset and the emotion and what is important, we must look at a person's values when we're dealing with that, and that emotional driver, what's in it for them? What's in it for them to change the emotional reaction to that trigger? So that was what we were kind of working on yesterday with this guy. Yeah. But as hypnotherapists, we're here to help people journey and understand their core emotional reactions to things and ask, is it working for you? Because that boredom emotion wasn't working for him. It was sabotaging him, and it was moving him away from his goal rather than towards it. So looking then at the behaviours that he was doing to continue sabotaging, he needed to create what we call a pattern interrupt somewhere to begin to really be mindful about what he's going to do before he even goes about doing it. This is where we're planning ahead and we're thinking, well, what's my new emotion that I want ruling? And in his case, he wanted to be happy. He wanted to enjoy his life and enjoy his family and enjoy his friends. And so there had to be a bit of a reframe for him around what it is to connect with family and friends over dinner or over celebratory times. And we talked a little bit about food and drink not necessarily being the main thing, that's something that he's doing when he connects to people, but it's actually the people connection that's the most important part of that moment, not the food and the drink.
Although in a lot of cultures, food can be, that is part of that connection. And, going back to the boredom, that could have been an emotional state as why he was actually eating as well originally, so that emotion then attaches and links to the food. So quite often it's not just one emotion or one event that ends up attaching, is it? It can be many, and that's why it's really good to start looking and being curious of, with your client.
What is that core emotional driver, and can we adjust it? Can we adjust the story of belief? Can we adjust the story of motivation? Can we get that right emotion ruling the house so we make the right decisions? So he went away. Yeah, he went away with a really clear plan about what he was going to do. So instead of just being alcohol-free for 3 days, he decided he was going to extend it for 4 days. right? So it's just that little extra. And instead of having the V, he was going to look at another more healthy alternative as a drink, because water is fine, but he felt he wanted something else. So that was what he was going to look into. With the boredom, though, there was a lot of stuff that he was doing in his work. Again, he needs to take charge of the boredom mindset. Like, often people, they forget how amazing their mind is and how they can stay occupied no matter what they're doing. They can find fun ways of doing it. But it's about challenging yourself. How can I break the boredom cycle? Where do I want to point my mind, rather than focusing on how boring this is? How do we find the pleasure in a moment, you know?
Yes, looking at things from a different perspective and changing that thought, but, going back again to changing your thought patterns and your emotions to those thoughts, flipping them. So there's many tools that we can use, isn't there, to be able to do that? Yeah.
Yeah. So when we're looking at that idea of hypnotherapy and using that to support the client's shift of emotion, it is an amazing tool, isn't it?
It certainly is, and it can work really quite quickly. You can actually see that change happening within moments. While your client is sitting there in front of you, you can see change happening to different emotions through their body language, and then later on through actually the way they speak to you and the words that they use and their posture, etc.
Absolutely. When we think about a winner's mindset, no matter what a client walks in the door with in the way of an issue, we've got to, for them, journey them towards the idea of success. Like, what does that mean to them? And what's the emotion that's going to drive that success? Because if we miss that emotional component, what happens, do you think?
You're not going to get that rapport. They're not actually going to have that drive to move forward. So you need to be able to hit that emotional response. Because look, if we have a choice if we could go somewhere or not, and we can choose not to, then, and that's what we really want. We're not going to go, are we? Or we'll go half-heartedly. So the strongest emotion does win.
Yeah. It brings to mind this person I had the other day, a client, and she'd been going, and this isn't everyone's experience, just to say, okay, but she'd been going and having therapy for 16 years, 16 years. And after that 16-year period, she realized she was actually worse than she was when she began. Something wasn't quite working. And when I started to investigate a little bit about what that was and how the person was working with her, I saw something that I do see quite often with students that accidentally go into the issue deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper without looking at the solution. And so we can kind of get caught up in all the things that are wrong, or we go into psychoanalysis. So we start to look at the why. Why did I think that way? Why did I react like that? Why? So I asked her, after a session, would you go away feeling like you had a light bulb moment? Did you feel lighter, or did you feel like the weight was on you? And she said, I just felt like heavy all the time after a session. There was a lot of processing I had to do. So after our first session, there was a dramatic shift because of the way that hypnotherapists work. We're very solution focused. So we're looking at what that client needs to get themselves out of that negative emotional state that they've been paralyzed in for such a long time. So it doesn't matter how many years someone's been suffering with something, one session can make a difference to move them out of suffering. I know that sounds really quick, but actually it's possible.
Because we often don't look, sorry.
No, you go.
We often don't look at things from all angles on our own, you know, and it's not until we start talking to a hypnotherapist or a therapist and they ask those questions that we start to explore and think, well, why did I react like that? Why does, you know, where does it stem from? And it could be from family beliefs, it could be from an incident that happened, an event. You know, there's many factors as to what has driven us that way, and if it keeps on happening or it was strong enough, then that's the way we act continuously, unless we want to change that pattern.
So there's benefit to identifying where it might have stemmed from, but there's no benefit at all in keeping on going and feeling sorry for yourself about that experience. So we must look at that experience through wisdom lens. We must start to ask a different question. What do I want to learn from that that's going to make me better as a person? So we ask a very different type of question. And as therapists, I think that's a really important concept to elicit positive outcomes for our clients. We must stay optimistic that that person is not their emotion. Their emotion is something they're experiencing, but they're not their emotions, and they're also not their actions either. The actions or reactions to something are just based upon what's happened in a moment in time, but that doesn't also define who that person is. That client in front of them is a person that has pure potential to be anything and to have a very different experience tomorrow than they had yesterday. And so when we're looking at that idea of identifying emotion and what's driving it, and some of the primary versus secondary emotions, understanding that in a therapeutic way can be extremely rewarding. It can be very, very useful for the person to identify, you know, what's going on when that happens and how do I want that to be different as I move forward.
Yeah, and so powerful for your client.
So when we're looking at fears and phobias, this is where that kind of work comes really in quite well, because we want that client to be successful with overcoming their fear or phobia, don't we?
We do. Yep, we do.
On that note, I hope you're finding this particular topic interesting. We've got a few more in the series. It's a new series talking about emotion. So tune in. We're here weekly. I launch it on the Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. New Zealand time. I also have my first class that started this year for 2025, and that's exciting. So we've got a few students that have joined the journey. And if you are interested in training to become a clinical hypnotherapist, we still can, you know, invite you in. So it's a rolling intake. So even if you're not ready quite yet, but almost ready, get in touch. Go visit the website nzach.ac.nz and you can find out more there. You can get in touch with us as well. All the information to get hold of us is on that website. But yeah, tune in and follow us, like, subscribe. Put the notification bell on too, because a lot of times there's so many channels pushing things out. If you're not got that notification on, you might miss the next episode. So please, you know, if you are keen on following, just do that little bit. That makes a big difference. It makes a big difference to us when people like it too. The algorithms like us more. So
and comment, chat with us, you know. Yeah, put some comments in, ask us some questions, and we'll answer them either in a talk time or directly in the chat back to you.
Excellent. So we'll see you tuning in next week, and thank you, Teresa.
Thanks, Meredith. Look forward to it. Bye, everybody.
Bye.